Our guest today is the president of the University of Chicago. Prior to his appointment as president nearly 6 years ago, he was a University of Chicago faculty member and administrator for more than two decades. As president of the University of Chicago, our guest today serves as chairman of the Board of Governors of the Argonne National Laboratory. He also serves as chair of the Board of Directors of the Fermi Research Alliance, LLC. Our guest today earned his bachelor's degree summa cum laude from Brandeis. He earned his PhD in mathematics from Harvard. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of the University of Chicago, President Robert Zimmer. Mr. President.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. It's actually a great pleasure to be here. I spoke here maybe about 5 years ago, and of course I speak a lot of places, but I remember with enormous fondness the time that I spoke here because it was just such a enjoyable and a bit rambunctious, but very relaxed and valuable crowd. So I'm very happy to be back. There are quite a number of people here from the University of Chicago. I'll mention a few of them in the course of the content of what I had to say, but I did want to introduce one person who's relatively new to the University of Chicago and who's important, very important for the city of Chicago. This is Derek Douglas, who is our new Vice President for Civic Engagement, comes to us from the White House, most recently from the White House. And we're just delighted to have Derek here, and he's going to make a big difference, already making a big difference, but will continue to make a very big difference in terms of our capacity to be productive with the city. Derek, you want to just... So my topic today will be the connection of the University of Chicago and the city of Chicago. And seeing so many familiar faces here, I know that a number of you have heard me talk about the University of Chicago, an institution that I obviously greatly value. I've been devoted to it since I first came to it 35 years ago, and I now have the privilege of leading. But before talking about the connection of the University of Chicago to the city, I want to start with some personal words about my own connection to the city of Chicago itself. As some of you know, I grew up in another city, New York City, in fact, in the heart of New York, in Manhattan. I went to public school from 1st to 12th grade. My father was a local physician in Greenwich Village, and my mother was a Jack, or perhaps Jill, of many trades, being the full staffing of my father's office and simultaneously taking care of my brother and me. I grew up in the 1950s. It was a time when a young boy could roam around and explore Manhattan, and that's what I did. Manhattan at that time was still in part a collection of post-immigrant communities with their own traditions, their own shops, and sometimes their own newspapers. It felt to me like everyone was there. I had a remarkable collection of friends whose backgrounds were from all over the world, Italian, Irish, Jewish, African-American, Chinese, Iranian, Puerto Rican, and Greek. And I can still remember each one of my friends from these various groups. I learned, of course, which shops had the best bagels, pizza, Greek desserts, French cookies, Italian bread, and, of course, hot dogs. And I greatly looked forward to the annual local street festivals, which were very common in New York then. We played baseball on concrete lots, stickball on the streets whenever there was no traffic, handball on the sidewalks against massive buildings, and touch football in concrete parks using the statues as blockers. It was, of course, neither idyllic nor simple. I learned how to avoid the guys who wanted to beat me up for reasons that were never clear to me, where to go and where not to go. I made a few mistakes in this direction with unfortunate consequences, but most of the time I made a particular mistake just once. the energy and the activity were never-ending. It was, for me, the most natural thing in the world because I was a young boy and it was all that I knew. But what I took from that experience, and which is really relevant to everything I've thought about cities since then, was a love of the urban environment, of the mixture of people, of the opportunity to constantly see something new and meet someone new. And I had the extraordinary feeling every day that things could happen, that great things would happen, and that in spite of all the differences, in spite of all the evident problems, that we were in fact all in it together. I'm sure this general description of growing up in a city is familiar and resonant for those of you who grew up in Chicago as well, and of course I know that there are many people here for whom that's the case. Now, I first came to Chicago in the 1960s while I was in college. I came with a friend of mine who is now in fact and has been for a long time, a partner at Sidley in Austin. We came in January, and it was incredibly cold. I'd never been so cold. But nevertheless, I fell in love with the city of Chicago on that trip. To me, it was the only other place I had seen that had the same qualities as the city in which I grew up. It was a city of communities. Everyone was here. The energy was everywhere in spite of the cold. And there was a palpable sense that with all this energy, great things were happening, and that many more great things, exciting things, could and would happen here, and that we could all be part of it. Unbeknownst to me at the time, I would move to Chicago in 1977. It became my home, and the city in which my own sons grew up, and the city that I fell in love with in the 1960s, and which has always been a place of excitement for me, where great things were possible. So when I returned to the University of Chicago as president in 2006, it was an opportunity for me to think about the connection of the University of Chicago, whose stewardship I was now entrusted with the city of Chicago, a dynamic engine, but as with all cities, a very complicated engine. And I asked myself, and I asked others the question, with one of the few great universities in the world, situated in one of the few great cities in the United States, what should the nature of the relationship be? How do they each contribute to the other and derive benefit from the other? And as is often the case, the beginning of thinking about significant questions demands a look at history, understanding how we got where we are and what those who came before us thought and what they did. So let's briefly return to the 1890s. Now that may sound like a long time ago, and in some sense it is, but in some sense it's not. My grandparents were children in the 1890s, so it's really just a few generations ago. The city of Chicago in 1890 was very young. Just 40 years before, in the middle of the 19th century, in 1850, the population of Chicago was 30,000. It was the 24th largest city in the United States. But it was exploding with energy and building of all sorts and becoming the great American city on the prairie. So by 1890, in just 40 years, it had grown from a city of 30,000 to a city of over 1 million, and had gone from being the 24th largest city in the country to the second largest city in the country. And with a look to the great cities on the East Coast that were central to the origins of the country, and a look toward the open expanse of the West that would help define the country's future, young Chicago was the city at the frontier. And Chicago was taking care of business. Commerce was robust, deals were being made, the population was growing rapidly, urban problems were being created, and some of the great institutions of the city were being formed. So in the midst of this cauldron of activity, in the fall of 1892, classes opened for the first time at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. And like the explosiveness of Chicago, rising as the great American city on the prairie, so the University of Chicago literally exploded onto the academic scene. It was an American university like no other university. It was devoted to research and education together, and committed to a seriousness, intensity, and rigor of inquiry like no other. It rose with dramatic speed and distinctiveness to the highest levels of the American and indeed worldwide academy. So this simultaneously flourishing and exploding onto the scene of the city of Chicago and the University of Chicago was no accident. The civic and corporate leaders of Chicago, the builders of Chicago at this time, rose to the leadership challenge that was posed by John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller challenged Chicago to support and embrace the work of the young genius that Rockefeller was supporting in creating a great new university, namely the university's first president, William Rainey Harper. The corporate leaders of Chicago, with the familiar names of Ogden, Ryerson, Rosenwald, Swift, Cobb, Culver, and others, rose in great support, not only because they believed in the work of Harper and his university, but because they understood with great foresight that the great city that they were building needed a great university within it. Silas B. Cobb, a successful Chicago businessman whose name is on the university's very first building, Cobb Hall, which I know those of you who are alums remember, wrote to the university's Board of Trustees in 1892, and he wrote, "I have watched with growing interest the progress of the institution, the care of which has been entrusted to you. I am persuaded that there is no more important public enterprise than the University of Chicago. It seems to me to deserve the most liberal support of our citizens." It's really an extraordinary statement, speaking about what it was essentially a private activity, that the importance of that as a public enterprise. Now, it may seem obvious today, as almost all great cities have great universities, an intrinsic and key part of their fabric, but it was not so obvious in the 1890s. But these Chicago leaders did have foresight, and their commitment to the university was key to its success. On the other hand, Harper insisted from the very beginning that an intrinsic part of his new university would not only be support from the city, but an impact on the city. For Harper, the whole point of the University of Chicago enterprise was to have an impact on the world. This would happen through the impact of its ideas, the impact of its alumni and the education they received, and the ongoing interaction of the university with the citizens of the city. Reflecting on Harper's commitment to impact in the city, Richard Storr, who wrote a history of Harper's tenure as president, described this in the following way. He said, "The outward thrust of the university was both deliberate and continuous." Constant focus by Harper. So from those early days in the 1890s, the university and the city have been inextricably bound together, and they continue to be so today. Now, one of the most dramatic early steps the university took with respect to the city was the creation of the School of Social Services Administration, now known as briefly as SSA. So very early on, the university had established itself as a leading center of social sciences research, which, roughly speaking, meant to understand the social structures and organizations that comprise various components of our society. But how would this be translated into application and benefit for the world? SSA was established in 1908 under a slightly different name, just 16 years after the university opened. Its stated mission was to be the vehicle through which the knowledge derived from the social sciences could be directly applied to the complex problems facing the city, and in particular, to the problems of those most vulnerable within this huge evolving metropolis of Chicago. SSA faculty, students, and alumni were among the first to use social sciences research and community data to inform the care and counseling of the most vulnerable members of our society. This integrated academic approach using evidence-based research to inform practice and policy continues to distinguish and to be the driving force perspective of SSA today. Now, over the years, what has SSA been involved in? Many things, but faculty members, administrators, and alumni have helped draft parts of the Social Security Act, have enforced child labor laws, have fought for low-income working mothers. They've shaped the state's juvenile court and foster care systems, pioneered programs in gang prevention. They've moved from their professional training to leadership positions within social service agencies throughout the city and across the country. Very importantly, they have fostered deep and long-lasting partnerships with multiple agencies in the city of Chicago. Their goal, again, has been constant. It's to produce research that is relevant, useful, and accessible in helping to find evidence-based research solutions for some of the most intractable problems of the city. All right, so with that kind of quick view of some history behind us, how do we think about the relationship of the city of Chicago to the University of Chicago today? So if you're a great research university, such as the University of Chicago, one of the things you need to be doing is you have to be confronting the most important problems of our times. And you have to be doing this through research, you have to be doing it through education, and sometimes you need to be doing it through direct action of immediate impact. Many of these most important problems that the world faces and that the country faces are captured in issues that cities, and in particular the city of Chicago, face, and that these very issues affect so many people across the country and in fact around the world gives them greater urgency. And for these reasons, these problems of the city define crucial research and educational opportunities and imperatives for the University of Chicago. I want to concentrate on 5 categories of these problems that cities face, each of which will be very familiar to you. First, school education. Second, healthcare. Third, violence and crime prevention. Fourth, economic development, innovation, and job creation. And fifth, which we've spoken a little bit about, the provision of social services. Of course, these categories are not totally distinct, as they're often deeply interconnected, but I think if you ask people, everybody in this room, write down 5 major issues that the city faces, this city and all cities in this country, and not just in this country, but around the world, you may not come up with precisely this list of 5, but I would conjecture that there would be huge overlap with virtually everybody's list. And in every one of these 5 areas, the University of Chicago is playing a significant role. And this is a significant role not just in abstract research, but this is a significant role in thinking through and acting in concrete terms how to see some of these problems addressed in the city of Chicago. In most cases, we're doing this in collaboration with partners. We have an extraordinary working relationship with Mayor Emanuel and his team, just as we did with Mayor Daley before him. I do want to remind all of you that Mayor Richard Daley is now a distinguished senior fellow at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. In Mayor Emanuel's first week in office, we and our team sat down together in his office and worked out the arrangements for a memo of understanding on coordinating our investments, of the university and the city in order to derive maximal benefit. This has been extremely useful, not just on the specifics, but has set a tone of collaboration that has been invaluable. So our relationships with the Chicago Public School System, the Chicago Police Department, the Park District, our aldermen, and very importantly, community organizations and religious organizations on the South Side, such as our work with Dr. Byron Brazier, following on the work that he did with his father, Bishop Arthur Brazier, before him, have likewise been crucial to our work. So what I'm going to describe are activities, but every one of them is deeply embedded in this type of partnership with other facets of the university, of the City of Chicago community. So I briefly mentioned the role that the School of Social Services Administration has played in addressing the fifth problem I mentioned, namely social services. So let me say some words about what we're doing about the first four: education, health care, violence and crime prevention, and economic development. With the caveat, which I think you will understand, that each one deserves by itself much more attention than the time we can allot to it today. So let me begin with school and indeed preschool education. And I've said many times, and I'm happy to say it endlessly, that in fact nothing we do as a society is more important than educating our children. Education changes the opportunities that individuals have for their future. It changes the trajectory of families. And it is, in fact, the foundation of our nation's ability to compete and flourish in a globalizing world. In every sense you take, it is literally the most important long-term foundation of national security and national health. And there are many ways of seeing this, but one simple way of seeing this is to see the importance of education on individual opportunity is just to consider income. This is not the only thing one wants to look at, but it is an important thing to look at. Over the past 30 years, the income of those, adjusted for inflation, the income of those with a college degree has gone up on average by 15%. The income of those without a high school degree has gone down by more than 25%. That's a very startling statement. And given that, it's important to ask, how are we doing in having students at least graduate from high school? So 30 years ago, 75% of people in the United States received a high school degree. This, at the time, made us the leading country in the world by this metric. And what's happened since then? Today, 30 years later, we still have 75% of students receiving a high school degree. So in terms of the percentage of students graduating from high school, we've made zero progress as a country over the last 30 plus years. But the rest of the world has made progress. Not only are we no longer the leaders by this, but we're actually now well in the middle of the pack. Now, we all know it's possible to get an absolutely wonderful high school education in the United States. I've seen a number of people here who are graduates of the lab school. My own children went to the lab school. The lab school is an extraordinary place. There are other extraordinary schools, public schools, private schools, parochial schools here in Chicago and around the country. But we also can identify many, many schools where significantly more than the national average of 25% of the students are failing to graduate, let alone go on to college. And it's precisely this concern that the University of Chicago is addressing through our Urban Education Institute, which is directed by Professor Tim Knowles, who is here today. So the Urban Education Institute, or UEI, as we continue with the world's obsession with three-letter acronyms. So UEI is a unique institution within American research universities. It brings the university's focus on rigorous inquiry and evidence-based research together with practice to improve student, teacher, and school success inside the public school system. Under its auspices, the university operates 4 charter school campuses on South Side neighborhoods. Students are chosen by lottery. Many enter our schools significantly behind grade expectations, but that's not how they leave our schools. As just one example, more than 95% of graduates from our charter high school are attending 4-year colleges. Those of you familiar with the averages in Chicago public schools understand the level of achievement that this represents. UEI also includes a urban teacher education program which trains students in part by experience in our charter schools contains the Consortium on Chicago School Research, which is an essential data collection and analysis center for the entire Chicago public school system, a model that is now being emulated with our help in other cities throughout the country, and Use Chicago Impact, which creates and distributes research-based tools to other districts and schools in order to improve school education nationwide. Now, as Daniel Hudson Burnham, who was one of the great builders of Chicago in the 1890s, famously encouraged everyone to make no little plans. Our goals in UEI are not small. We want to have a major impact on school education throughout this country and to change the stalled trajectory that the country has been on for 30 years in seeing all our children and families benefit from what education can bring them. So let me now turn to health care. Again, certainly one of the most challenging issues in our country. Obviously a preoccupation now of Congress, the Obama administration, and the Supreme Court. The University of Chicago Medical Center plays multiple roles in the city. It's, of course, one of the leading providers of health care to our citizens, and it is, in fact, the leading provider for disease requiring highly complex advanced care. A great deal of our capacity to deliver care of this sort is based on the extensive research agenda at the Medical Center and the Pritzker School of Medicine, all the way from studying fundamental biomedical phenomena, which will be the basis of future treatments, to clinical trials on new drugs and devices. Now, that we are a great medical center serving patients in the Chicago region, on the South Side in particular, is, I suspect, not a surprise to anyone. But beyond this, and this is what I do want to emphasize today, we're also, through our Urban Health Initiative, which is led by Dr. Eric Whitaker, who you've already said hello to, through this we're focused on the system of healthcare in Chicago, in particular on the south side of Chicago, and our role in the system. And as we know, it is really the systems of care in the United States that are most problematic. We know how to treat individuals, but it is the system of care that is the difficulty. And while the Urban Health Initiative encompasses a number of activities, I want to focus on two that are directly connected to this problem of healthcare systems. The first is patient care in multiple coordinated environments. This means working with local primary healthcare physicians, local hospitals, community centers, clinics, and other care providers to provide a more integrated approach via a healthcare network in which people can receive care in the environment most suited to their medical situation. The second issue is research and analysis on social factors that have an impact on health and wellness, and then working with community groups to try to address some of these factors. This includes educating people about health issues, nutrition, availability of certain foods, which again is a huge healthcare problem, not so obvious unless you've either experienced or thought about it, youth employment, insurance, drugs, alcohol, and more. Much of this work is done in collaboration with Southside community groups, both secular and faith-based. And once again, while our work on the healthcare systems on the South Side are what we are engaged in, our goals are not small. Namely, we aspire to understand through this work how great urban academic medical centers can best partner with the cities and communities nearby to create a richer healthcare environment and system throughout the country. Now, let me turn to the third of the major issues, namely violence and crime prevention. And as with the first two issues, this is at once an issue that has deep and lasting impact upon individuals, and at the same time is a huge problem and cost to society as a whole. And this is really one of the interesting features of all of these issues. They have this very direct human dimension on what is happening to this person's life, what is happening to their health, what is happening to their education, to their children's education. And this happens one by one to what happens to people's lives, and yet because they're systemic, they become fundamental societal problems, and one needs to think about them in a systemic way. And so these dual aspects of these two problems are what makes them so important. I think it's well known that the violence and crime in this country, and maybe the laws, help contribute to an incarceration rate that is much higher than that in any other developed country in the world. Reflects a tragedy of wasted human potential among both those incarcerated and victims. The economic costs to society are massive, with estimates ranging from several $100 billion to $2 trillion annually, as Professor Jens Ludwig of the University of Chicago testified in 2006 before the U.S. Senate. And Professor Ludwig is also here today. Now, in 2008, in response to this persistent and vexing feature of American life, Professor Ludwig helped found the University of Chicago Crime Lab. And the Crime Lab's goal is to understand, and again, through analytic and evidence-based methods that are much more rigorous than are often applied to this problem, which of our policy innovations and potential innovations are likely to achieve the greatest success, with the goal of helping to inform and guide policymakers in addressing crime and violence. The importance of this research, the importance of guidance by evidence, not by ideology or guessing, was emphasized by Mayor Richard Daley at the announcement of the establishment of the University of Chicago Crime Lab in 2008, when, in his characteristic blunt way, he said, "We need research and evaluation to have an effective program, otherwise we in government are going off on tangents." And I think what that statement does is it reflects some of the frustration that people feel. You know, there's this policy, well, it doesn't work so well, let's try this. And this bouncing around approach to policy, which one has seen in education, one's seen it in health, one's seen it in crime, is problematic. And what one actually needs, it's not going to solve all your problems, but what one needs is informed policy decision-making, not, hey, here's an idea, let's try that. You know, it's kind of like Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, let's put on a show. You need evidence as to know what to do. Now, while the Crime Lab has ongoing projects throughout the Chicago area, in almost every nearby city, county, and state criminal justice agency, I want to describe a particularly noteworthy finding, which I found interesting and I think is indicative of how you can really start thinking about things in different ways when you do this kind of research. So after a detailed study of youth homicide in Chicago, including contributing causes and intervention points, the Crime Lab determined that much youth violence, including gun violence, stems from impulsive behavior by young people who often have a hard time accurately interpreting the intentions of others. Now, that's an interesting statement to think about. So the Crime Lab has partnered with the Chicago Public Schools and local community organizations to carry out a program to strengthen non-academic skills like impulse control with at-risk males in high-crime parts of the city's south and west sides. It was structured as a randomized clinical trial in order to provide evidence about the program's effectiveness and cost effectiveness. And in economic terms, and again, anybody who thinks about just the depth of cost and multiple layers of cost to our society in dealing with crime and worrying about crime, these findings suggest that every dollar invested in strengthening social and cognitive skills among at-risk youth may return from $10 to $30 in benefits to society. And these findings are figuring prominently in the city's large-scale plans for reducing youth violence in the future. So as the last topic, that I want to address, and I'll finish up with this, is the University of Chicago's role in economic development and job creation. And the first point to remember is that we're a major economic force simply by virtue of our size. We're the second or third largest employer, depending upon how you count, private employer, excuse me, in the city of Chicago, not just on the south side of Chicago. We have about 18,000 employees, and adding together our expenditures on building projects over the past 5 years and what we're projecting over the next coming 5 years, we're spending about $2 billion on building projects alone. Our consolidated annual budget is about $4 billion, the vast majority of which is actually spent in the Chicago region. Now, another fundamental feature for economic health in the city is of our training of highly qualified individuals and our role in helping to make attractive the city of Chicago for a large segment of creative and entrepreneurial individuals. Booth School of Business, our law school, our college, for example, not only turn out many successful people who bring their skills to the Chicago business community, but very specifically, the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship in the Booth School of Business has developed now into one of the leading entrepreneurship programs and business schools in this country. And within the past decade, students at this program, these are business school students who have created businesses through these programs, have generated about $250 million in venture funding investment on a market basis. As our science programs extend to molecular engineering, we're planning to have yet greater work of the Polsky Center in the Booth School with new technology-driven startup companies that will grow out of this new molecular engineering initiative. Now, we've also moved directly into using our economic power to catalyze business development on the South Side. In particular, we've undertaken, in partnership with the city and supported by Alderman Will Burns and Tony Preckwinkle before him, a major development on 53rd Street in Hyde Park, in an area that frankly has seen only minimal economic development for many decades. A new office tower, a Hyatt hotel, parking garage, movie theater, a clothing store, restaurants, fitness clubs, and more are currently under construction and in fact will open soon, and we expect to see yet more activity as these open. This, of course, is now, as we speak, creating construction jobs, but subsequently will create other employment opportunities, a greater tax base, and a platform for further economic development. Now, I've tried to give some examples of how the University of Chicago is involved in the major issues that confront our cities: education, health, crime, economic growth, and social services. There is, in fact, much more that I don't have time to discuss. Just one or two sentences about them. Our alumni from the Harris School of Public Policy populate many municipal and state agencies. Our arts activities are an integral and growing part of the vital arts life of the city, with partnerships that we have been developing and expanding not only with the great cultural institutions downtown, but with many of the smaller community arts groups on the south side of Chicago. Our business school provides business training to residents on the south side. We have a leading program in contracting with minority and women-owned businesses in the area of professional services. A lot of programs around minority hiring are not focused on professional services. We started a program 3 years ago to focus specifically on professional services, and we want to see it be more successful, but we're very pleased with how it's going now. And we do have thousands of students involved in working in community organizations. Just talking about personal history, and we were talking about this a little bit over lunch, is the 1960s, of course, were a time of great political involvement by students, and people often ask me, how come students aren't involved the way they were? And my answer is they are involved. They're just involved in a very different way. and it's reflective of the problems that they're trying to solve. In the 1960s, there were basically two huge problems that could only be addressed by the intervention of the federal government. There was the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, and that was it. I mean, that's what everybody was upset about, and there was nothing that could be done without the federal government acting on those two issues. The issues now are, in a certain way, much more diffuse. They're much more nuanced in a real sense, and our students are, in fact, deeply engaged in these issues, as I think many students are across the United States, but they're involved in it much more through direct engagement, direct work in communities, rather than seeing a call for the federal government to do X as the solution to our problems. So earlier I spoke about the university and the city in the 1890s. Today we have 120 years later, very different city, very different university. Both still are bubbling with energy. Vital and successful and creative cities are in an ongoing process of reinventing themselves. A lot of writers have written about this, but I think anybody who thinks about and looks at cities sees the importance of this sense of ongoing reinvention. Those that fail to reinvent themselves, and you've all seen examples of these cities, they become stagnant and ultimately fall behind. But those that do continuously reinvent themselves, and we also know what examples those are, Chicago, New York, Boston, cities that do reinvent themselves, they become the most powerful loci of energy, creativity, and innovation in the country and, in fact, in the world. Universities also, driven by enduring values, need to continuously reinvent how these values are manifest. And the city of Chicago, the University of Chicago, have deep interlocking connections since the early days. We continue to have them today. As Mayor Emanuel said to us in that first weekend when we were in his office, the more we are coordinated and the more we are purposeful about working together in how we reinvent ourselves, the greater value it will be for all of us. It's a perspective that we embrace and one that is certainly going to guide us as we go forward together in the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, now you heard that. Take out your blue books. Only in pen. You too, Superintendent. I'm going to give you, this is a... Make sure, oh, no. Even with tenure, we don't go there. All right, so if you have a question for the President, we have a question. If you got to sign your name, let the record show. Figured this would be the only guy with enough guts to do it. Ken Griffith, Wolf Point Strategies. Please estimate the current goals of faculty members who are capitalists. Thank you for being realistic. City Club, nice.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by saying faculty members who are capitalists. I guess I'm not exactly sure what the question is. Let me take it, let me give one interpretation, possible interpretation of the question and answer that. So there's been a lot of question around the University of Chicago School of Economics. This school, of course, has been driven for many years by an understanding of the power of markets and market forces to advance economies. And you can ask, well, with all of the tumult of the last now 5 years, how does that affect the way University of Chicago economists think about the world? So first, let me say that universities have a very long perspective. Political challenges come and go. They create data that needs to be incorporated into the way you think about, evaluate problems, and how you articulate perspectives. But it is rarely the case that one short-term event totally transforms the way you've thought about things. What it can do is take a situation, create a situation where you now have more evidence, you now have more information, and it helps you see what's working and what's not working. So Gary Becker, well-known Nobel laureate in economics, who's very identified with kind of a market orientation, has often said that the market, the view of the importance of the market is not a theological principle. It's not an ideological principle. It's a data-driven view. That it's his belief and others' belief regarding interpretation of real evidence. So what I would say is that there's a lot of work being done on how to incorporate whatever evidence that is real evidence can be systematically built into the way people are thinking about things. The other issue is that people don't think the same thing. We don't have one group all sits around thinking the same thing. What we have are a bunch of people who are arguing with each other constantly and very, very robustly. This is not for the faint of heart. And I think what you see in the economics department and economists in the business school are different ways of incorporating the data that's been generated by everything that's come out in the last several years with different angles on how to think about it and so on. But again, this is a long-term, University of Chicago Economics Department's been great for 75 years, and it's going to be great for another 75 years. And there will be times, there will be cycles in the way people think about this, but the underlying value of data-driven inquiry, which I've tried to emphasize in whatever I was talking about here, is what drives Chicago economics, not ideology.
I could give a personal history of that, but I'm not going there. Taking one of the classes from that short little fellow, Mr. Friedman, you don't know the definition of pain until you sit there taking notes. This is from Martin Stern, U.S. Equities. Thank you for all the university is doing for the city. What can we do as a business community aside from writing large checks? Should I go on? Okay. Due to help, blah, blah, blah. Large checks threw me off. Due to help the university in its expanded mission.
Yeah, this is a very good and important question for us, and we've actually been giving quite a bit of thought to this. Let me just give you one example of, I can give you a few examples. One of the and I'll give you one example that's more at a kind of a systems level and one that's more at a personal level. Again, these are sort of things we're constantly dealing with. At a systems level, one of the things we've been thinking about, and Derek has been leading this, is given our work in entrepreneurship in the business school, and given the university's new program in molecular engineering, we are going to be seeing increasing numbers of technologically driven startup companies. Simply given what Booth is already doing, the Polsky Center is already doing, we're going to be seeing a continued growth in already the kind of startup companies that they've been doing. A connection of the business community to this set of activities, understanding them, figuring out how to participate in them, figuring out how a connection with what we are doing and being involved in can benefit your own particular situation. In other words, being aware of what we're doing, exploring potential relationships together, that would be a great thing for us. The exact structure of this we're still actively working out, but we'll be talking about that a lot more over the coming time. The other is something that we've been focused on very much in the college, which is expanding the nature of internship opportunities for our students. Increasingly, students see not always business and not always for-profit, but certainly including business opportunities as an important component of their education, so that when they're finished with their education, after they're, not with their education, but with their degree, at the end of 4 years, that they come out with what I would say is a more robust portfolio of experiences and ways of thinking about how their education can connect them to the world. It's something they're deeply interested in. Now, this is an enormously talented group of people, and the more that they can have experiences of various sorts of internships, summer internships and so on, the better for them, and I believe the better for Chicago business, because it will expose Chicago businesses to an enormously talented group of people at a time when they are starting to explore what am I going to do going forward. And if you look at one thing Chicago has to focus on, and I think the mayor's been very eloquent about this, is the attraction and retention of young, highly motivated, driven, creative people. And again, the cities that flourish are magnets for this. New York City and San Francisco and Washington are some Bay Area, not necessarily the city. But these are three huge magnets for people. We have to become more of that magnet, and a way to become more of that magnet is take the people we're producing ourselves, such as from Chicago, and start giving them a built-in connectivity to business in Chicago. That is something that will actually help everybody, because the more that we have that kind of environment, that kind of community, I think the better it's going to be for the city, and the better it's going to be for everybody in the city.
We have two more questions, and I never thought I'd ever say this to a president of the University of Chicago or chancellor in the old days. Shorter answers, but you have to leave at 1:30. This is from Luigi Pecoraro, IIT, Stewart School of Business. Can you point to any research? Can you point to any research that the USC is doing that would point to economic development solutions, i.e., increase exports?
Well, I think there's an enormous amount of views based on research from the faculty in economics and public policy and in the business school as to how to do this. And probably some of the solutions are not startling to you, but the question of building an environment of economic growth and putting that as a higher priority than some of the other issues that rise to the top in a very political environment is what people would say. Now again, you have to, everybody can have their views as to what priorities are worth following, and it doesn't mean that that has to be your highest priority. But I am just saying that there are ways of dealing with things that people believe they understand at Chicago that would in fact address the issue you're raising. So it's not so much it's not so much not knowing what to do as what is the political context in which it's taking place, and what is the political will or political priority setting process that puts that higher or lower compared to other options.
The last question, and from Alan Bombick, Legat Architects. You're not a member, Alan, but it's a very good question. So, By the way, anyone, President Zimmer, anyone can answer this one, but since you're the speaker, we'll let you do it. You know what's coming, right? Please comment on the importance of the possible discovery of the Higgs boson particles at Argonne to the University of Chicago and Illinois economy. I'm sure you all want to join in on this, but we'll let the president go first.
Well, so as you all know, the Higgs boson is part of a general Higgs phenomenon that purports to explain how particles, how other elementary particles have the property of mass. Now, this is an interesting problem if you're interested in high-energy physics, if you're interested in fundamental structure of the universe. It's actually relevant to understanding cosmology and the evolution of the universe, for those of you who expect to be around closer to the end of it. But this is an example of fundamental scientific research. There are examples of more application-oriented research where it's easier for people to see what the economic consequences are because it's directly linked to various sorts of activity. But we've seen over and over again that the fabric of understanding science really is that. It's a fabric that people sometimes say, well, it's serendipity or surprise that fundamental research leads to application. I don't believe it's serendipity. I believe it's unpredictable as to exactly what is going to come out of it, but because you are studying and understanding fundamental properties of nature, we've just seen over and over and over again how that, in fact, enables people to do more, maybe not with that exact problem, but the techniques, the surrounding expertise, and so on enables people to do more. So I would say that this is an example of a problem of very basic research where the outcome itself, I mean, nobody's going to say, great, now I understand the Higgs phenomenon, so I'm going to build a better mousetrap. But it's going to fall into what we see over and over again as a part of the fabric of understanding science and will lead in that way to capacity for economic development.
Help the Cubs win the world championship.
Well, you never know.
Big round of applause.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, thank you. We have a